Hello and welcome to another episode of the National Museum of the Marine Corps' Weapons Wednesday. I'm Jonathan Bernstein, the museum's Arms and Armor Curator. When most people think of Marines in combat in Korea, thoughts tend to drift to the Pusan Perimeter, Incheon, and the Chosin Reservoir. However, the first time Marines fought in the Hermit Kingdom happened nearly 80 years earlier. In 1870, after a number of attacks on American merchant shipping off the Korean coast, the American minister to China, Frederick Lowe, was instructed to negotiate a treaty with the Korean government in order to protect U.S. interests and initiate trade. The U.S. Navy's Asiatic Squadron was tasked with transporting him to negotiate, and he sailed aboard the USS Colorado, Admiral John Rodgers' flagship. Captain McLean Tilton was the commander of the Marine contingent aboard the 9 ships in the squadron, and his additional mission was to provide security for the minister and ensure his safety. As the squadron put in at Boise Island off the coast of Incheon, only minor political figures came out to meet with Minister Lowe. Lowe and Admiral Rodgers made it clear that the mission was peaceful, but required meeting with dignitaries that had the power to negotiate a treaty with the United States. Further diplomatic efforts were ignored. The mission came to a head on 1 June 1871, when several of the smaller vessels from the squadron sailed northward towards Kanghwa Island and were fired upon by the fortifications there. Our vessels returned fire and silenced a number of the shore batteries. Admiral Rodgers initially wanted to land the Marines and capture the forts, but after some discussion with Minister Lowe, it was decided that they would wait 10 days for the Koreans to apologize. No apology came. On the 10th, Captain Tilton and 105 Marines disembarked from the USS Palos and landed on the muddy shore of Kanghwa Island, near one of the fortifications that had been silenced by the guns of the USS Monocacy. Capturing the first fortification with no opposition, the Marines set up a 12-pound Dahlgren boat howitzer to command the approaches to their position and bivouacked for the night. The remainder of the landing force came ashore the following morning, and in all stood as a force of 651 Marines and sailors. They consolidated their positions and prepared for the assault, which would begin on the morning of the 11th. Jumping off at first light, the Marines led the way. According to Tilton, "We entered the second place after reconnoitering it without opposition, and dismantled the battlements by throwing over the 50 or 60 insignificant breech-loading brass cannon, all being loaded, and tore down the ramparts on the front and right face of the work to the level of the tread of the banquette. While these cannon were almost all thrown into the Han River, 3 were set aside to return to the U.S. But the battle was not yet over. Once the fortification was cleared, the Marines led the way to the final redoubt, where over 200 Koreans waited. The fighting was intense, if brief, and by the end, 243 Koreans and 3 Americans lay dead. The 3 brass cannons and a large 12-foot by 12-foot flag were captured and returned to the USS Colorado. Ultimately, the mission to Korea was a failure, with no diplomatic or trade ties established by Lowe. The Asiatic Squadron returned to China later that week, and it would be some time before relations between the U.S. and Korea were normalized. The 3 guns were brought back to the U.S., with one going to the U.S. Naval Academy. The other 2 were in private hands until this gun was donated to the Marine Corps Museum in 1953 by retired Air Force Lieutenant Colonel Robert Sweeney. The 3rd remains in a private collection. The gun itself is an interesting breech-loading design. The round, powder, and breech block were loaded together into the top of the gun and then held in place with a wedge. The gun would then be aimed and fired, the breech block removed, and another rounded breech block could be quickly loaded to maintain a steady rate of fire. The gun itself dates to the mid-1600s, and the inscription identifies both where it was cast and how much the gun weighs, roughly 140 pounds. For more information on the Arms and Armor collection and the fascinating artifacts at the National Museum of the Marine Corps, please check out our website and social media pages.